Hi, Ted. You have been a major force on the house music scene for many a year, a DJ that is known as a craftsman, always introducing the unexpected into the mix with your wildly dynamic sets that are famous the world over. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks. That's quite an introduction. I hope to live up to it. Yeah.
I'm sure you will. Um, we always like to understand how our guests got to where they are today. So, I want to roll it back to the beginning and find out whereabouts you grew up and how you first discovered music.
Well, I first grew up in Savannah, Georgia, in the
Hmm.
South, and things were very black and white. And
Hmm.
my I don't remember being introduced to music. It was just always around me. I have four older brothers and sisters
Hmm.
who were teenagers and in the racist South, or even in the United States, period. There were
Hmm.
black stations, radio stations, and white
Hmm.
radio stations, and we
Yeah.
listened to a lot of black radio. So my introduction to music was sort of asking me, when did I learn to eat? I have no idea.
So, I mean, in terms of listen, like that real segregation, like you say, a white radio and black radio. What was what type of music during that era was being played on on a black music station compared to a white music station?
Well, my earliest memories are dancing because I've always danced and I wanted to be a dancer. Actually, it was my first love.
Hmm.
Was dancing to Ray Charles, Hit the Road Jack, and Sam and Dave, and did they do Hold On I'm Coming? I think whatever that
Yes.
song was. I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
that backbeat
Hmm.
so well, just
Yeah.
as a kid. I remember things like that, Aretha Franklin, and Motown, and those were things that I listened to early on in my
Yeah.
life. They were just around me, and it was electric. But as I say it to you,
Mm.
I'm remembering that I like the really rhythmic stuff. I like the
Hmm.
James Brown stuff. I liked the funky stuff with the big backbeat, and then Motown sort
Yeah.
of. It was a really important period when I was a kid because, as I said before, the first record I remember is "Hit the Road Jack" that I
Hmm.
loved. I remember being obsessed with that.
Yeah.
But that was during a period of transition musically. Black R&B music. There was like a soulful jazz, very intellectual sort of fusion of music that
Yeah.
merged into this pop element of
Mm.
this funky pop Motown thing. This
Yeah.
is what I
Yeah.
remember as a kid.
Uh
And
huh.
so, boy, that was a really great time for music, and that's I knew back then that I was going to be rocking the music for the rest of my life.
Well, that was going to be my next question. So, you mentioned there, like, how maybe dancing was like a first love and whatever. Did you say you knew that music was a path for you for the future?
Absolutely, I connected to it early,
Hmm.
and 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 I was just moving to it. I was just
Hmm.
a dancer. I expressed physically with
Hmm.
music. I was really connected with music like that, and I danced all the time.
Yeah.
And my siblings were all music people. They loved music. They were all in high school band. There were trumpets and French horns and glockenspiels and in my house and clarinets, and it was just always musical.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah. First love dance. I don't know if my first love was dance or my first love was music, but music got me dancing, and dancing was the thing I wanted to do.
Yeah.
When I studied music when I was a kid in school, I
Uh
played
huh.
clarinet, flute, and some intermediate brass stuff in later high school. But I I was more of I wanted to dance more than I wanted to do anything else.
So talk to me about, going out, as you're getting older and you're going out to, maybe some clubs or bars or whatever and discovering, a community aspect of dancing, like communal dancing, being amongst people and really getting kind of your groove on. Like how did you find that when you were growing up and getting older?
Well, if I could tell you a small story before we get there,
Of
look
course.
at how it's working for me. Um, because it was really, because I'm from my family didn't support my love of dancing. I'm not
Hmm.
from that nest.
Hmm.
They were very rigid in their religious beliefs, and they were really limited culturally.
Hmm.
And I think I was sort of like a black sheep in that I embraced everything outside of this sort of limited idea of how things were supposed to be in
Yeah.
a non-binary kind of way, as I say it.
Hmm.
I just could not be limited, and
Yeah.
so early on, I wanted to dance. I wanted to dance. I wanted to dance, and my first love of dancing took me to skating, and I would roller
Hmm.
skate. And
Hmm.
we had a roller skating rink on the white side of town. We
Yeah.
had one black night, but I was too young for that. And I would go on Sundays again, and by myself. I would take a bus. It took me 2 hours to get to this place.
Hmm.
And I'm like fifth grade, maybe
Hmm.
fifth grade, 10 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, because they played disco. They played,
Yeah.
dance music, and
Yeah.
I could move, and I felt like I was flying, and that was my first communal thing.
Yeah.
Although the community wasn't having me because
No.
I was black. And so I would force myself into that thing because I
Yeah.
really wanted that experience. And I would come home, and the weekends that I didn't get to go skating, I was watching Soul Train with my friends in the projects. And not all
Hmm.
of us had TVs, so we would bounce from place to place to watch Soul Train together in a huddle.
Hmm.
And that was my community of dancing initially. Um, on through high school, I continued to roller skate, and I was competitive, and I would, rack up trophies and stuff, and
Hmm.
I was invested, and I couldn't go far with dance because none of the dance studios would really accept me
Hmm.
because they were white,
Hmm.
and they gave me reasons to come on days that they were closed, or they would do everything to not have me be a part of it. And like I said, my family wasn't very supportive in my dance endeavor. So I kind of did it myself. And during high school, I met a dance partner. We became disco dance partners. We competed. We won trophies.
Hmm.
And so it was like that. And that's
Yeah.
what got me in the clubs. Really was,
Uh-huh.
dancing,
Yeah.
and finally started going to clubs.
Yeah.
And I was a bit of a loner. I still am,
Hmm.
but I was connected with music all the time as I look back. And so, um, yeah, well, that was my way to the clubs. Disco dancing in high school, and
Yeah.
then obsessed with disco.
Yeah.
Started going to clubs,
Hmm.
underaged at 17.
Yeah.
And then I found gay clubs. Now,
Hmm.
there was a big difference here.
Hmm.
This is where my career took me by the horns. Um, there were straight clubs,
Hmm.
and in straight clubs back then, the MC was the party.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played records, and yeah, he played great records, but he was the celebration. He brought the kids together. He made the thing happen, and he was the master of ceremonies. Until I went to a gay club, and I noticed there was nothing but music.
Hmm.
Not only did I not hear a DJ, I saw people react to music I had never heard before, B-sides,
Yeah.
album cuts.
Hmm.
long versions of things I'd never heard of, and I was just expanded immediately.
Yeah.
And so that became my new. I wanted to be there all the time, and this is before I'd even admitted to myself that I was gay.
Uh-huh.
I hadn't come out. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't living a life out loud, but I was
Mm-hmm.
so attracted to music and the way it was done in gay clubs that I made it my home.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end this in a minute. But this is my
No.
beginning.
No, this is
This is
perfect.
great. Uh, I would go to the club all the time. I knew all the music because I was there when the club opened and I was there when the clubs closed. And I was there Monday through Friday. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any school. I quit school like almost at the end. I just quit and I was
Mm-hmm.
clubbing. And one night I went to the club and the doorman was sitting on a stool in the DJ's booth changing the records.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what is he playing? And I went up to make some requests. And after about 4 or 5 times going up and asking for something, this was like an off night.
Mm-hmm.
I said, why are you up here? Where's the other guy? And he said, well, he quit and I'm filling in.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you think they'd give me the job if I asked for it? Because I know a lot of this music. And he was like, you should ask. So I went to ask for the job. This is in a gay club.
Yeah.
And don't remember the details after, but they let me play. I'd never done it before.
Yeah.
And I went in and oh my God, nobody taught me anything except this is the volume, this is the slide.
Oh
And
man.
it was an old Surin Vega mixer and you slid from left to right on the,
Yeah.
this is 1979.
Wow.
I was 18.
Yeah. Wow.
And, and they they fired me after a few things because I wasn't taught how to do it,
Yeah.
and there was another DJ there who really knew the flow, and I was just in
Mm-hmm.
my head
Yeah.
until about a few months later.
Mm-hmm.
I was at the movie theater watching something ridiculous like Saturday Night Fever, something crazy like it was one of those disco-y movies, but it wasn't Saturday
Yeah.
Night. I was leaving the theater and somebody ran up to me and said, "Oh, the owner of the club's looking for you. He's been trying to find you. The DJ fell down the stairs. He was upstairs smoking pot and fell down and broke his collarbone. And there's nobody to play music. And this is a Friday night." And I
Yeah.
went in, and for some reason, it clicked
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Yeah.
I locked into the thing that I was supposed to do, and then I found myself because I thought, okay, this is I'm so expressed here, and I'm
Yeah.
relatively shy. I don't like talking on mics and stuff and interviews. I don't do these things very often, but I I knew that I would have a voice and not have to use my voice, and
Mm-hmm.
it felt like who I wanted to be as a dancer was a person who wanted to be expressed without
Yeah.
verbally,
Yeah.
you know, commanding any attention,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's how I got into it. I just
Amazing.
became so obsessed with
Mm-hmm.
the art of mixing and the art of connecting with people through music.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I do it more now because of connecting with music than I do my love of music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Incredible.
that's the thing that drives me. I look for music only because I want to share it with them and get that reaction. I want to create that back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's how I've been the last 1,000 years.
Yeah, since it clicked for you that night, I mean, that must have been incredible. So that must have been the moment where you were like, okay, this is now my career, right?
It
Mm.
was getting through the session, and back then, you opened the club, so I think I had to be there at 8:30. The club opened at
Hmm.
9, and you played until 3.
Yeah. Wow.
And what I remember is after the shift, feeling this accomplishment that
Hmm.
I can do this thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And I still didn't know anything because nobody taught me, and I So I had to figure out how to line beats up, and I had to figure out, it didn't click immediately
Hmm.
how to sync things,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how to count in and all that stuff. Even though
Hmm.
I studied music in school,
Yeah.
playing vinyl, your head's all over the place. You got to
Yeah.
choose the right record. You got to
Hmm.
have it be at the right volume.
Hmm.
And there's so many things to tune into back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were live drummers.
Oh, but yeah, I know, and that's it. The swing on, especially the disco records from that era, is it can you
Yeah,
really
and
learn how to mix if you're learning how to mix that.
yeah, and back in those days, especially in Georgia, we didn't work with rotaries. We worked, some of us that had the rotaries, I think they were GLI 8990s or GLI 90, something old GLI mixers. They were rotaries, but they also had a slide.
Okay.
So when it was complicated, you'd slip cue on your beats. So you just
Hmm.
count it in and then you just slide, you just do a quick mix.
Yeah.
And a lot of people did that back then. I did that.
Hmm.
I became the queen of that. No, not really, but I was obsessed with it. I loved it.
Awesome. I mean, so that was like you're talking about disco and the late '70s, moving into the '80s, and you're already in a prime position for when early house and prototype house really starts to kind of make an impact from that kind of early to mid '80s kind of sound. How did you first discover those rhythms and sounds coming out of Chicago and Detroit? What was your reaction to them when you first heard them?
Well, initially, initially, it wasn't a conscious effort to look for those sounds and
Hmm.
or play the house sound. Initially, I ended up in this small club in Atlanta. I'd moved from Savannah to Atlanta, and I ended up in this small club called Weekends, which was basically, it was a gay club, but it was so back then, especially in the South, there were black gay clubs and there were white gay clubs,
Hmm.
and this was a white gay club that wasn't one of the preppy clubs. Like there were leather clubs, there were
Hmm.
preppy clubs, hardcore disco clubs, etc., etc. And
Yeah.
this was a white club that was nestled in the neighborhood that I ran most frequently, which was Midtown Atlanta.
Hmm.
But the difference in this club was the DJ didn't play like the rest of the white clubs.
Hmm.
He wasn't playing like this Euro-y sort of uh, like the flirts and all that stuff.
Yeah.
He was playing funk. I
Hmm.
remember this so vividly walking in there. He was playing funk and soul
Yeah.
and disco
Yeah.
and alternative.
Hmm.
So any given night, you'd hear Def Jam original concept,
Hmm.
or you'd hear um, Houdini,
Yeah.
and you'd hear 6 Sputnik, or you'd
Yeah.
hear The Cult and The Cure and Depeche Mode,
Hmm.
but you'd also hear just all of these funky, soulful things.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the place for me because it was just expansion to me. And I just thought, okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Hmm.
I worked really hard to get a job there, and I was finally accepted at that club. And that opened my eyes to a lot of things. I always brag about this, but because RuPaul was go-go dancer at that club,
Uh-huh.
Ru was go-go, and Larry T. Do you know who Larry T is? Larry T.
Yeah.
started at the same time that I did at that club.
No way.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
And it was a really great club. And so the mix of people, it was like college radio kids. It was post-punk rockers and gay hustlers and drag queens and drug dealers and the people that didn't fit in the sort of poshy gay places.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
so cool. It really was to me. It was so cool. So
Uh-huh.
I got this job there, and the idea in that club was to not play the traditional things, but to actually um, be for me random and progressive
Yeah.
was the word then.
Yep.
And so I started playing music then. And as I said, when I was playing then, it was like the original concept. It
Mm-hmm.
was, early Def Jam records. It was Red Hot Chili Peppers and George Clinton. It was like those funk soul fusion things.
Yep.
And also it was Curtis Blow and it was Renee and Angela and it was
Uh-huh.
Tremaine, like really good stuff.
Yeah.
In that sort of bubble, I remember Music is the Key, J.M.
Mm-hmm.
Silk.
Mm-hmm.
Was it J.M. Silk? J.M. Silk, Music is the Key,
Yep.
which was the
Yep.
first. And it turns out later, a lot of people say that was the first house record. I didn't know. I didn't know what house was, but I remember that being in rotation. I
Yeah.
remember Strafe Set It Off and Marshall Jefferson, Move Your Body being in rotation, while
Yeah.
also playing, like DAF or Big Audio Dynamite
Yeah.
and all kinds
Yep.
of shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this had to be like 80, 85,
Yeah. Yeah.
86.
Mm-hmm.
Then I switched clubs to a place called Rio,
Mm-hmm.
and I became like the main DJ on the ground floor. And I became a Billboard reporter, and there were
Mm-hmm.
only 100 at the time in the United States. And
Yeah.
we made up charts to report back to Billboard magazine that compiled the big dance chart, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had direct contact with all the promoters, and I think that was the moment where I learned about house
Mm-hmm.
being different from, or just the movement called house.
Yeah.
That record you're playing there, that's house.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know those records were house. It was just one of those things we played.
Yeah.
And I, after a few years in this club, I met a DJ who worked at the black gay club called Loretta's
Mm-hmm.
in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
and they were house down. They were playing house, house, and house. Now, don't let nobody fool you. They were also playing Bobby Brown and all those pop records.
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
will claim they were house back in the day, but nobody played strictly house because nobody was having it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was just too abstract a thing to just play house. Maybe in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, but nowhere
Yeah.
else in the States.
Yeah.
They'll tell you they were playing house from 1987 on, but they were also playing Aretha Franklin and all these other things, right? So
Yeah.
so in this friend of mine grabbed me by the hand and said, "Come hear me on Sunday," and I
Mm-hmm.
went, and it flipped me again.
Yeah.
This time it was the blackness of it,
Uh-huh.
and I just thought, "Oh fuck," this is like more underground than I thought I was being. And I started programming more house, and because I was still a Billboard reporter, I made these contacts with these independent labels from Chicago as well.
Mm-hmm.
They were starting to send me more stuff, and I started playing more things. But then I became kind of interested in acid house more than house,
Mm-hmm.
and so at a certain point, this little club opened. Rio, my managers at Rio, quit
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
decided to open this small place called Colorbox.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bar, and it held about 200 people, packed,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Uncomfortably, 200 people. But that's the kind of place it was.
Yeah.
It had a storefront window, and then it was deep and
Yeah.
narrow.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a cheap sound system with a bass under the stage at the very back of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But because acoustically, because it was long and how it was designed, it sounded so good for Atlanta anyway,
Yeah.
right? The bass wasn't subby, but it was deep and long. It carried the
Yeah.
room, especially as the room filled up.
Mm-hmm.
I started playing at Colorbox, and I started doing acid house parties, me and my friend
Yeah.
Carolyn. And we did these flyers, Happy Flip. This had to be like 87, 88, 88, 88.
Yeah.
And we did these flyers, and she said to me, "Nobody's coming in on Tuesdays, and I'm so bored." She was a bartender, and we both worked at Rio together, and so she moved to Philly. She said, can you just come play some music for us? And I said, okay. She was like, I'll give you a $25 bar tab, and that's it. And I was like, great.
Yeah.
So it was an opportunity for me, because I was buying music by the bulk now, to try
Uh-huh.
out my acid records that I had never played. So I had to go back to Rio and play them, right?
Yeah.
A week into it, there was nobody there. A week into it, my friend Carmen said, you should move these tables. And so we moved the tables,
Mm-hmm.
and we had about 8 people dancing.
Yeah.
The next week, we had about 20 people dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got the tables off the floor completely. And in about a month, the place was packed.
Yeah.
And then the local colleges, they have 3, maybe more, local colleges heard
Mm-hmm.
about the party. It sort of morphed into this house thing. The more they came, the blacker it sort of. I would sort of lean into it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, it was crazy. It was so unexpected. It was just the
Yeah.
best thing. And I learned this lesson that all you have to do is commit to loving it, and they'll come. Because I honestly, we had
Mm-hmm.
no idea. That was not our intention.
Yeah.
Like, it became so busy at times the cops had to shut the street down.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they would loiter outside. There were more people outside than there were inside. It would just fit 200 people, and you couldn't see inside because the glass would the glass would be wet, the glass would be sweating, so you couldn't see in, and the water would be dripping from the ceilings. It was a really fun
Wow.
spot. It was cute.
Yeah.
It was cute. I don't want to oversell it, but it really was a moment in my life that again propelled me
Mm.
forward into this dream of mine of being a DJ and being successful at it. And so
Absolutely.
that's how that shit happened.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a proper party. That is, yeah.
It was
That's,
great. It was great. And I got, because it was run by gay people, no, well, it
mm-hmm.
wasn't owned by gay people, but because I was hosting, and Carolyn, she's gay. We had another gay bartender, a really handsome gay boy at the door, but we had everybody in there. It wasn't just a gay club. And
Mm-hmm.
it was in a kind of a posh neighborhood in Midtown. It was a sort of, a white neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
that was sort of like freaked out when we packed all these black people up in there on Tuesday. But they were accepting, and a lot of them
Mm.
were New Yorkers that had come down for school. And
Yeah.
so it created its own thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't my magic. It was sort of like our magical investment in
Yeah.
just doing some acid house for fun. And but I'll tell you this, like, highlights when I think back, it was fun, and it was kind of ghetto. Like, I remember getting Deep in Vogue by Malcolm McLaren,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
we didn't have the proper setup. I love this. We didn't have the proper setup, but we had a movie screen at the back of the house, and we had a projector, but they weren't synced. And
Mm-hmm.
I was DJing, and so I, on one turntable, queued up the vinyl for Deep in Vogue, and in another finger, I pushed the button on the video and
Mm-hmm.
synced it and played Deep in Vogue in the middle of the night, which was really like a great moment, right? It was like,
Uh-huh.
holy shit.
Yeah.
And this was like at the beginning of voguing
Of
being
course.
like this
Yeah.
new.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the queens howled, and that was great. But we had nights like that were just kind of magic. It was just accidental. One night, RuPaul
Amazing.
came in on my birthday, on a Tuesday night. My birthday landed on a Tuesday night, and Ru was back from New York, and he performed "I'll House You," and it was like a mashup of "It's My House" by Diana Ross and "I'll House You," and I'll never forget it, because those kids were like, "What the hell is that?" And this was before Ru was doing full drag. Like,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
like he had like shaved head, but he had like this mohawk with this shit hanging from his head, and wearing next to nothing, like a loincloth, and and
Yeah.
fisherman boots and jock with like girdle straps, and it was like they were like, "What the fuck is this?" But they
Yeah.
loved it. It was great. It was magic,
Hmm.
and that was a great spot. Thank you for letting me talk about that.
Oh no, incredible scenes. Thank you for painting that picture. It's so vivid.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, kind of moving through your career a little bit, like you were lured to New York to work for Emotive Records in the '90s. And that you signed people like DJ Pierre to that label. Under his Future Scope moniker. I mean, firstly, moving from Atlanta to New York, like how much of a bigger change was that for you in terms of, still getting involved in the scene?
It was a huge change.
Mm.
Change. But I want to say something. I want to set the
Hmm.
record straight. My bio has been written and rewritten and rewritten, and and people have taken liberties at saying things that it's just not the order of how things occurred.
Hmm.
My decision. So David Chang and Josh Dariensis, who owned Emotive Records,
Hmm.
used to work for a company called Advanced Alternative Media that sent me promos as a Billboard reporter. That's how I
Hmm.
met them, and I remember them
Hmm.
saying, "We're going to start this new label," and they I had the respect because I knew my shit. I know my music. I knew my new music. I was on top of it, and they would call me, and we would have these great conversations. As promoters, they were
Hmm.
promoters then, and they
Hmm.
they decided to do their label. So when they decided to do their label, I was still playing house, and one of the records we were talking about was Maud Get on the Move, which they had licensed and signed to Emotive as the first record.
Hmm.
They didn't lure me to New York.
Uh-huh.
I ran out of work in Atlanta,
Uh-huh.
and I was just sitting.
Yeah.
And the music, I just wasn't an attraction for any of the clubs. And I think house music wasn't on their palate. They didn't want to hear house. That's too radical and too different. And they wanted to hear pop. They wanted to hear the
Yeah.
hot pop things.
Yeah.
And I get it, but I knew that I had to, if I wanted to continue working, I had to move. And so I decided to move to New York.
Mhm.
I moved to New York, and I interviewed with somebody, I think it was Polygram, Polydor, something like that. I wanted to be a record promoter. My friend Leslie Doyle said, "Why don't you just put in applications?" And I did. And I
Mhm.
humiliated myself because I wasn't prepared for what I was faced with when I got there. And they were very
Yeah.
condescending, and what? That this is how they talked to me when I walked in. What is it? What do you want? I was expecting, "Hey, welcome. I heard you
Yeah.
were coming.
Uh-huh.
This is the job detail. What do you think?" It wasn't that kind of conversation. It was very condescending, and I ran away with like my tail tucked in, and that was that on that. But
Yeah.
in the while this is happening, I'm still communicating with David and Josh, and David
Mhm.
and Josh invited me to work at Emotive
Mhm.
after a while, after
Yeah.
after a few weeks. I was
Yeah.
getting barely next to nothing, and I want to set this up so well so that people know how this worked.
Uh-huh.
Finally,
Yeah.
the office space was about this big. There was a desk.
Mhm.
There was a long desk, like the kind you see in school where kids write, that seats maybe three children. There was a long desk. There was another desk, an office desk with Josh attached to that desk, pushed so closely they were attached.
Uh-huh.
And then there was another professional desk behind his. So you could literally walk 10 feet from the door to the window,
Mhm.
and the entire wall was just promos and boxes. That's how
Yeah.
that's how big the office was. So as I walked in my first day, um, Charles Dawkins reminded me of this. Charles Dawkins was sitting there stuffing envelopes. I think his record. Do you remember his record? You gotta wake up. You do. You gotta wake up. It was the first big Emotive hit.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Wake up, we can do it. Charles Dawkins. It was fierce. Came from Baltimore. He was, and they were like, they got everybody's attention. When
Yeah.
I got there, I think it was his promo that he was in there stuffing envelopes and helping the guys out, and so I got
Mm.
that job. So
Mhm.
even though I was hired as a promotions person, I knew nothing about the job, but I was hired at Emotive to
Mhm.
stuff envelopes. And because I was wet behind the ears, they really took advantage of the fact that I would just do what they didn't want to do. So
Hmm.
when the elevator opened with UPS boxes, I unloaded the boxes. I put the boxes up. I took the white labels out of the boxes. I
Hmm.
put I stamped all of those stickers on each of those promos, 100, and I put them in the envelopes. I printed the envelopes and then I mailed them out. So that's what
Hmm.
I was doing. I was a
Yeah.
gopher
Yeah.
until Brighter Days.
Hmm.
And when Brighter Days happened, and I had direct contact with like my friend Larry, who was writing the Billboard column at Billboard. So I had a lot of respect from a lot of people. I really
Yeah.
did because
Yeah.
because I had just created some great friendships.
Mm.
This helped Emotive.
Hmm.
They weren't necessarily so favored, but
Right.
they weren't people didn't diss them, but they just didn't give them the attention that they gave me because I had established some relationships in different ways. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
I was a DJ and I had helped a lot of people, and so I think it just gave me some favor.
Yeah.
So when I got to the label, I started making phone calls.
Hmm.
My thing was this: you should get this person on the label. You should get this person on the label. Oh, we don't know them. Oh, well, here, let me call them. So
Yeah.
that's who I was. So
Yeah.
I called Victor Simonelli. I didn't know Victor Simonelli, but I think we had met in a club on Wednesday night at Soundgarden Bar, and I was like, "Oh, I want to call you." And he goes, "Here's my number." I called Victor Simonelli. And I said, "Can you bring some promos to the office so we can um, have you do some stuff on Emotive?" And he was
Uh-huh.
like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah." And Victor Simonelli came in, but
Uh-huh.
when that happened, I was kind of pushed back to my duties.
Right.
The
Yeah.
bosses took over.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Now, I owned this as A&R later because it was my ear and my intention and my actions that brought him in. No, I didn't sign him directly. No, I didn't do contracts, et cetera, et cetera. But I
Hmm.
got him there. And so
Yeah.
I started telling them, I'm bringing people to the label. You have to put my name on it now. So the
Hmm.
same thing with Pierre. I called Pierre, and Pierre
Hmm.
brought in Plastic.
Hmm. Hmm.
I didn't get to talk with Pierre because they just took over and did the business stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of that happened.
Mm.
And it wasn't until later that I decided, you know what, I am promotions person because I'm on the phone making sure all these motherfuckers get it. And they would only give me 100 promos to deal with. And so what would happen is during the day, I would sneak out of the office. Before they came into the office, I would grab extra promos and sneak over to Def Mix Record Pool and stick them into the bins of Burt Bevins in England, and Justin, um, what's Justin's last name? Justin
Bergman.
Berkman and
Bergman. Yeah.
CJ McIntosh
Hmm.
and this person and that person. And then that got me in trouble because other UK DJs would call me and say, "Why can't you give us promos?" And da, da, da. But the bosses were sitting next to me and my hands tied. Anyway, that's how that happened. That's how my life happened there.
Uh-huh.
And then I learned later that he wasn't paying people
Mm.
that I had established relationships with on the
Hmm.
label, and I didn't know. How
No.
would I know? And
Yeah.
it strained relationships, and so I got the hell out of there after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like you say, but it is about having a good ear and making those connections, and basically just having the balls to be like, you should be here, you should be doing this, and at a young age as well. That goes a long, long way.
Absolutely, and I think ignorance is bliss, and I think that at that time it was about having fun, and it's like
Mm, hmm.
we're all having fun, and these people that I called, I think they were also DJs,
Hmm.
so I may have sent some promos to one or two of them, and also just felt like, because I've established contact with you, why don't you bring some stuff over? You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
happened like that. And Hector Romero as well. He had friends, Davidson Ospina, and all these
Hmm.
other people who came to the label and delivered the goods. But
Yeah.
in the end, we both got out of there because it became a little complicated.
It's a good word to
But I
use, I
only
think.
ever worked at record labels, and I'll say this: the only reason I ever worked is because I needed to get to the next weekend because all I wanted to do was DJ. I could give a shit about record labels, and of course I love talking to all my DJ friends. And I think Liquid Groove was a label that I worked with that I
Mm-hmm.
liked. The people, my friend Stefan Mandrax, he's still my friend.
Mm-hmm.
But those other guys that I work for, mm, mm.
So, I mean, you're talking about just making it through to the next weekend, and obviously, DJing in New York as well. There are places like the Limelight, Save the Robots. We've interviewed for this podcast, Todd Terry, Roger Sanchez, Danny Tenaglia, David Morales. And they all talk about these places. Obviously, you were playing amongst these guys in those venues as well during that era. Just paint a picture for us, like what the scene was like with those venues and any kind of overriding memories from that era.
Well, I think when I first moved to New York, Danny Tenaglia was a remixer, but he wasn't written. He wasn't the god that he became,
Mm.
and neither was Roger.
Hmm.
And they had done some significant work, but they were just they were still DJs sort of buzzing about. And
Yeah.
I'm saying that in comparison to who they became.
Hmm. Yeah.
It was a neighborhood of DJs, and I knew a lot of these guys because a lot of us were Billboard reporters. Louis Vega, Tony Humphreys. That's another. I didn't even tell you the story about going to Zanzibar and just, that changed my life. But um, a lot of these people I knew as Billboard. We were all Billboard reporters at the same time, and
Hmm.
we would go to the Winter Music Conference in I think 1987, 88, 89, and it was a very intimate thing. So we got to know one another
Hmm.
because because it was intimate.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was days on end sitting around and having drinks and talking with people by the pool and handing them your card and trading promos, and it was a very easy, sweet thing.
Hmm.
So going to New York, a lot of these guys, first of all, the scene was good.
Hmm.
Save the Robots was hot. Save the Robots was a funky spot. It was kind of, it's where everybody ended up after all the clubs closed and stuff like that. So everybody was high as hell, but it was good musically. And DJ
Hmm.
Smash would play. Everybody, it was really musical people and up and coming people, and uh, and it was great. What was the question again? You want me to paint the scene back then? It's it's
Just yeah.
it's
What was
hard
the
to paint
scene
the
like?
scene.
Mm.
For me, Sound Factory Bar was my favorite club,
Mm.
even over Sound Factory, and Sound Factory was magnificent.
Hmm.
Sound Factory was big and thunderous, and the sound system was like something I'd never heard before.
Hmm.
The Palladium was still big and throbbing. And when I first moved to New York, the big DJs were David Morales. Lenny Fontana was at the Tunnel, I think.
Hmm.
Um, Frankie, Junior Vasquez. Oh, I would go hear Johnny Donnell at the Boy Bar. But Johnny Donnell also had this party, Jackie 60, that was fire after
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
That's a whole other interview. You should really talk to Johnny Donnell about Jackie 60. That was
Okay.
incredible.
Okay.
But um, it was a time where people could afford to rent spaces
Mm.
and offer great things.
Hmm.
And New York still had rundown, abandoned places where people would set up things and blast music, and there were still great loft parties. And I can remember taking elevator shafts up to second floors of places that had, it opened out into parties, and it was a different place in time back then. And I was lost in that. I was lost
Yeah.
in that. I'm glad that was my experience, but I can remember, oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. And
Yeah.
gradually things picked up for me.
Hmm.
But I never really got uh, a lot of work in New York City until I started playing in Europe.
Hmm. Yeah.
Until I went to London
Hmm.
and got gigs at I played at Queer Nation for the
Mm-hmm.
guys, Queer Nation, and at what was that place? Covent Garden, the Gardening Club in
Oh,
Covent Garden. That was it. The
yeah,
Gardening Club was what it
yeah,
was.
yeah.
On
Mm-hmm.
Friday nights, my friend had a party called Feel Real, and I played at Feel Real.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sunday I would say play. And anyway, when I played at Ministry of Sound once in '93, I think it was, I met somebody who brought me back, but also got me a gig in Italy. And then my things took off for me in Italy with Angels of Love as they rose in fame, as did my
Yeah.
name with them. And I had a lot of work, and then I would just come home and not have that work in New York City. Yeah, I
Wow.
played in a few clubs. I bounced
Yeah.
around, but I didn't have a home
Yeah.
that was significant.
That's really interesting. And yeah, to have that success kind of, and then it shine a light on what you could do, I suppose, back home. But so when you were coming over here to play in the UK and in Europe as well, were you playing in places that you'd actually never been before? Had you ever been to London before, or,
Yeah, I've been to London
Ibiza and
many
these
times. I think
places?
my first time in London was at the first DMC convention. It could have been
Okay, yeah.
'87 or '88.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would come yearly. It was at the tail end of Acid House. This is what I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I can remember about the early days, well, the biggest sort of thing that happened to me was hearing Paul Oakenfold at Heaven at that famous party. I forget the name
Mm-hmm.
of it,
Spectrum or Future.
Spectrum.
Yeah.
And I can remember him after a show of like Inner City and Tin City and all of these great acts that had really, really hot records. I tell this story all the time, and nobody's as excited as I am. He dropped when the shows were over, he dropped "Gotta Find a Way" by Mantronic, which is like a down tempo, funky, and the roof came off the fucking place, and I just thought, holy shit, they would not do that in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
If you did that after a show, they'd leave. I can remember my first time playing CNC Music Factory. Everybody dance now, and they all left the floor. That's who Atlanta was. That's who Atlanta was back in the day. So, so that was extreme for me. I'd
Mm-hmm.
never been to Italy before I went to play with Angels of Love,
Yeah.
and I'd never been to Switzerland. And my friend Mandrax, who owned Liquid Groove with Oliver Stone, they brought me over to play,
Mm-hmm.
in Zurich, and then in Lausanne, and then all of a sudden I'm playing in, Bienne and Bern and all these other places. So I couldn't believe it was happening.
Yeah.
Greece, Turkey. I never dreamed of it. Really,
Yeah.
it just happened to me that way. And I
Yeah.
think it was because because I was with Emotive, but my name was now being stamped on records that were really good. And also the house music movement was rising,
Yeah.
and I'd been in the right place at the right time. And I just sort of rode the wave. I
Mm.
don't think it was any specific thing that I did that granted me that gorgeous career out there on the road, but be there and be appropriately accepting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take it. Uh-huh.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to fast forward a bit to like kind of current situation, and we're talking about having success, in New York as well, and as of April of it's 2024 as we're having this conversation, and as of April this year, you're the new resident at the New York party Battle Hymn, which is described as the gospel according to the dance floor. I mean, can you tell us about this party, where it is, what kind of crowd and vibe that you find there?
Well, this party's been around for years.
Mm.
I think I'm glad that it's still on everybody's lips, but it's been around for years. Years ago,
Hmm.
Honey Dijon was a resident at Battle Hymn,
Hmm.
and you
Hmm.
know her sound. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily gospel, but it's gospel to the dance floor. Um, Ellie Escobar, who's a magnificent, he's extraordinary. He's wide, he's vast in his knowledge of music, and he's a great player. He
Hmm.
he he creates happiness. and I'm always intrigued when I hear him. And he doesn't play things that I would play, although
Mm-hmm.
sometimes he plays things I wish I could.
Mm-hmm.
He's a great player. The Carrie Nation, a queer duo who are taking on the world right now and doing really great things. Not just in New York, but in Berlin and other places.
Mm-hmm.
They were residents, and I think initially when I first started going to battle him, it was and Hex Hector was there for a long time. When I first started going to battle him, it was a different crowd. It was sort of Banji meets drag meets club kid meets I don't know what. It was wild. It was gay. It was in your face. It was
Uh-huh.
expressive.
Mm-hmm.
It's still all of those things, but it's sort of a bit more modern day. You know, things change all the time. It just
Mm-hmm.
morphs, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it still has these really great elements, and I'm glad that they brought me on because they're very open to music in a variety of ways. Like I said, Ellie Escobar plays very different than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I play very different from the Carrie Nation and the other guests that come there. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a place you want to be because they accept you musically.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to get. Um, it's kind of hard to find one spot where you can be expressed in so many different areas and genres of music. Battle Hymn's the fire. Battle Hymn's still the fire.
Absolutely. And as a resident, what you've got to think, I suppose, about what type of music policy you bring to that party as a resident. I mean, you've kind of alluded to it there in terms of like, this is just me, and
Yeah.
it's everyone's accepting of that. I mean, do you go in there knowing that you've got to play a certain way, or depending on how you feel, or do you just go in there and just be yourself and
Only energy wise.
mm,
Only energy wise. So at Battle Hymn, I do the same thing I would do anywhere else. I just do it with a little more octane. And for me, how I play is I'm I'm not unlike that person in Atlanta that played a variety
hmm
from LL Cool J to Shriekback.
hmm
I will start with some old disco, and it might be a soulful, funky disco, and I might play a Michael Gray record, a happy disco Michael Gray record next to it, and then the next one might be, and me, ampersand. How do you say that? And me,
I
how
think
do you
it's
say
that
that?
just
How do you
and me,
pronounce
yeah.
that? Whatever, whoever it
Yeah.
is. But I'll play some Afro and I'll play some
hmm
house and then I'll get some tribal and I'll play some tech. I'll play whatever I want. Uh,
Yeah.
the 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 years of doing this has afforded me an instinctual way of being behind the decks,
hmm
where I know where not to go when I shouldn't go. I know where to go when I sense this is enjoyed and this is what's needed. So I trust my instincts, and it's who I am as a player. You can
Yeah.
sit me in any situation, and I'll figure that shit out. I'll figure it out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I,
What is a type of, perfect set for you in terms of like a set length or, or location,
6 hours.
6 hours.
6 hours, starting with classics,
hmm
uh, building with musical disco influenced house, building to techier percussive house, building to techno, and then reminding people that pianos exist in the world at the end. I,
I
you
love
know,
that.
I like drama, and I'm sick of that word, but it's not necessarily what I like. I like fluctuations of energy.
hmm
I like I like the unexpected. I like
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah. I mean, that's what
I,
makes it exciting. When you're on the dance floor and you're hearing a DJ that has not only the time to take you on that journey, but just that unexpectedness of, or the trust that you're placing in them of like, this person, they've got me in the palm of their hand and they're guiding me through this night through with all this music. There's nothing better
yeah,
than that. Yeah.
you want to go for a ride. And the truth of the matter is, I'd much rather be asked, what kind of crowd would you want it from?
Mm-hmm.
Because I like people who are receptive. I like people who want to go for a ride, not who wants to stand there for 2 hours and hear me hammer out the most intense records I've got so that they can feel their buzz. I
Yeah.
want people to bring the party to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring my party to you, and you bring your. We'll meet at the party, and we'll bring the party to each other together. Right? I mean, that's ideally how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Because at a great party, you can do whatever the fuck you want. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what Battle Hymn is. It's a great party because you can go all over the place. And honestly, I've had to play after Eli Escobar, who will his last record will be 135 BPMs,
Yeah.
and then they'll come in at 120,
Yeah.
and they're
Mm-hmm.
ready.
Mm-hmm.
They're ready to go to church after they've heard the techno. You know what I mean? God bless me.
God bless you indeed. I mean, you know, we're at the point in the interview, we've been talking nearly an hour now, where we've got to talk about the, you know, the choices for the perfect playlist, for the House Culture Perfect playlist, which is on Spotify. I mean, there are, um, I don't think there is anything in here at 135 BPM techno, so we're all good on that, which is great to hear. Okay, so we always start off with well, firstly, this playlist is something that every single one of our podcast guests has submitted 5 tracks to, and they're based on 5 different themes. The playlist on Spotify itself is absolutely huge, and you can imagine how eclectic that is from all these different tastes and different themes. There's some real interesting stuff in there, but all of it is, you know, curated by experts, so it's a great listen. We always start off with a catalyst tune, a track that might have got you into dance music, house music, you know, any type of music that made you move or groove. You have chosen Family Affair by Sly and the Family Stone. Can you just tell us why that popped into your head when you saw this written down?
Because you said the first.
Mm-hmm.
The question was about the first.
Yes.
And it was one of the first 45s as a kid that I bought.
Mm-hmm.
And I was obsessed with that intro. And I knew it was mechanical.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a vast knowledge of, music or electronic music. But when I think back, it's one of the first times I think I heard elements of electronics. And I still love that record. I still
Yeah.
love it. But
Mm-hmm.
my early electronic memories, that's one of them. But so is Machine Gun by the Commodores.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That would
Uh-huh.
have been the second one that I and I. But you didn't give me a slot of five. I would have just done it. Machine Gun. Oh my
Uh-huh.
God, that was
Yeah.
such a big record for me as a kid. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
But
I mean, I'm going to throw that one in there as well because I love
well,
that.
I tuned into it. Oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
electronic. That was the
Yeah.
thing that caught my ear. Oh.
Yeah, I totally get that. And okay, so moving on, a floor filler. What is a go-to floor filler? And it's interesting because people approach this in different ways sometimes. It's, like we've had some recently that have approached it as a floor filler being a track that you play just to change the mood, to bring people onto the dance floor, whereas mostly everyone approaches it as like, this is just an absolute banger. Like people just go crazy when I drop this. I think it's the latter with this one for you. You've chosen All I've Got by LF System.
Well, I say that and that's Lenny Fontana.
Mm-hmm.
I say that because it's the biggest record it gets the biggest reaction of all the records I play just by being a great record.
Mm-hmm.
When I drop it on every single floor, it's the one that brings everybody to fucking gather. It's just, and I can't believe it's not the biggest record in the world.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
But in my sets, when I want to peak, when it's like, oh, okay, it's time, I reach for that record.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Okay, a sunsetter, a perfect track to soundtrack a sunset. You've chosen the ambient version of "Beautiful Child," the Tahoe ambient version. It's by I can't remember who it's by. I haven't written that down.
It's by Sorry, I can't remember their names
No,
either.
don't worry.
Oh,
Um,
shoot. It'll
um,
come to us.
yes, it will come to us. Yeah.
Well, I choose it because I was a fan. I was a fan of this group's. They just play really beautiful, blissful things, and
Hmm.
I have a playlist called "Back to Mine"
Hmm.
in my iTunes, and it's the one that has me go back to it and go, "What is this again?"
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so calming. It just like caresses my spirit.
Oh,
I just love it for that reason. So
beautiful. No, and I'm glad it's in the playlist now. That's so good. Okay. A tearjerker. This could be dance music, whatever it could be. Um, you've chosen Shantae Moore, the Frankie Knuckles, the bomb mix of her track This Time. Tell me about that.
well, Frankie Knuckles will jerk a tear. I think it's just the elements. It's something about the piano. There's a few chord changes in that record. It's not. It's just a magic. There's a point in that record. It's right at the bridge or the pre-chorus or something, and she starts singing, and he brings this piano and these chords in, and together it's just so beautiful that it makes me well up every time I hear it. It's not what she's singing about. It's not the
Mhm.
message of the music. It's
Mhm.
like it's oh my God, this is it's like it's so beautiful to my ears. I can't believe that somebody made this.
Yeah.
Like that random thing turned
Mhm.
into that magic. And I can remember being at Sound Factory Bar when he played it off of his reel before he started, and I remember having that effect on me, just like oh wow, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a beauty, absolute beauty. Okay. Last tune. The crowd are asking for one more. What do you play? You've chosen Melvo Baptiste featuring Annette Bowen. Did you pray today?
I chose that because that first of all, that record is hot.
Hmm.
Um, and I just think it's an obvious it's that hot and it's that new that there are certain records that you can play for the first time to people's ears that they go, whoa. They don't know the record, but
Yeah.
it's like, whoa,
Hmm.
that's that record for me. Right now. That's that record for me right now. And
Yeah.
I've played it a few times, and he leaked it to me a few months ago,
Hmm.
and it's been one of those records that it's just like okay, boop. There's this magnificent breakdown in it, and when she comes back in, you're just like so glad she came back. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. I love that kind of a record. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, and that was the last tune, and this is the last question of the interview before we wrap it up. Thank you for sitting down with us on the House Culture podcast. We are obviously house culture, and we're not just about the music; we're about the whole culture of the scene. So, the personalities, the art, the fashion, the clubs, the locations, all the different people that make up this scene. When you think of the term like house culture, what pops into your mind? What does it mean to you?
That's a complex question. I think black people. I think I think I think soulful. I think um, that's what I think.
Hmm.
I could try to elaborate, but that's what comes to mind. Black people.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't experience house culture out on the road, on stage, playing for people facing me.
Yeah.
But there's a spirit that you can't bottle,
Hmm.
and it's not experienced everywhere. And so I've yeah, maybe it's from my years of being experiencing house.
Hmm.
Um, these are new generations,
Hmm.
rebranded
Hmm.
version of house,
Hmm.
but my initial idea and concept is gay and black, and not gay and black, but gay people and black
Hmm.
people and gay people together,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
soulful.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
this is, like you say, this whole, there shouldn't be a recalibration of it as generations change. There should be a through line through it all that people can understand and know where this music came from and exists from and why it's here and why it's so enjoyable and freeing. And people shouldn't ignore that. So, your answer is absolutely perfect in that sense.
good. It's the truth. It's the truth.
Mm,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's a
Wow.
simple answer too.
Perfect. What a place to end on. Thank you.
Do I get to plug my great new record with the illustrious Black before I
Of
go?
course you can. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Speaking
Absolutely.
of energy that you can't bottle,
Hmm.
I am so glad that I was able to join forces with them and them join forces with me. And we collaborate, and our friend Andrew, who's a missing link, but he ties everything together. Andrew, I'm so glad I got to work with them because I am a fan of who they are out in the world,
Hmm.
and they are electric, and you can't bottle electricity. Do you know that? You've heard that saying before? You can't capture their spirit on vinyl, but if you ever get a chance to go see their show,
Hmm.
they are not going to let you down. It is like the happiest, most fun, exciting, great thing to be a part of.
Hmm.
So I'm glad I'm working with them. Go buy it. Let the music set you free. Ted Patterson and the illustrious Blacks together.
Thank you so much for that. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. No, it's been great to talk to you.